All right, so it looks like it's 6:01. We'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to the very first stakeholder workshop for the Vineyards at Marsh Creek Event Center Amphitheater. I am Alan Bacalar, Engineering Manager of the City of Brentwood, responsible for managing this project. This workshop is intended for the Brentwood business, arts, and education community. Thank you everyone for taking your time out of your busy schedules to participate in this workshop. I would like to inform you that this workshop is being recorded and will be made available online for viewing at a later date. For the record, today is Thursday, May 6, 2021. It's about 6:02 p.m. The goal of this workshop is to introduce the project, share the results from the April stakeholder survey, and most importantly, to have a conversation with stakeholders to identify needs, challenges, and concerns for the project. As a matter of logistics, as the workshop progresses, please feel free to enter questions you may have utilizing the chat function within Zoom or via email provided in the invitations. Additionally, there will be opportunities to ask questions at key points within the meeting. When prompted, we will be utilizing the raise hand feature within Zoom for questions. Once we acknowledge your hand is raised, we will then unmute you so that you may ask your questions or speak within the workshop. Before I hand the microphone over to our architect, DLR Group, I would like to quickly introduce the city team participating in tonight's meeting. We have Bruce Mulder, Director of Parks and Rec, Greg Lawson, Public Information Officer, Josh Ewan, Senior Analyst with the Economic Development Department, Joe Odrolowski, Parks Planner, and Laurie Sanders, Project Service Specialist. With that, I'll hand it over to Jordan to introduce his team.
Thank you very much. I'm Jordan Levin. I'm with DLR Group. I'm a principal architect with the Cultural Arts Group here, and I'm the Cultural Performing Arts Leader in California. I'll pass it over to Dan.
Yeah, I'm Dan Clevenger, also a principal with DLR Group. So the focus for both Jordan and I is really on cultural facilities, performing arts facilities. We'll share a little bit of our work today. So I've been fortunate to actually be part of the study that was done a couple of years ago there in Brentwood that's led to the point where we're at now for this to be a project that's headed towards implementation. So we're really excited that that's come to fruition to be part of this process.
Alan, you're muted.
With that, we'll give Bruce a chance to give us a little background and history about the project before we take this forward. So Bruce.
All right, thank you, Alan. Again, I'm Bruce Mulder, Parks and Recreation Director with the city. And I want to thank those that are here taking time out to provide some input on this really exciting amphitheater project. So I think pretty much everyone that's on the call today understands the history of this amphitheater event center project, but it goes back at least officially with the city council approvals to 2004 when this was put into the development agreement with the Shea Trilogy residential development that you see taking place. So for several years, it's been part of that development agreement. And part of that development agreement was that the developer would pay $3.5 million towards this amphitheater event center project. And then there's another $3.5 million or so in other development fees from this project for this amphitheater event center. So we have roughly $8 million, just a little bit over that, 8.1, I think, that will be going towards this first phase, which is the amphitheater part of this project. The event center eventually would be a second phase that would come down the road, and that would need additional funding. So since 2004, we have gone through a couple of different feasibility studies and market analysis projects, and then it has gone through a conceptual design phase where we had brought on a local architect, RDG, that did some very initial conceptual scope concepts that the community has seen in the past. And through that, council has done some strategic planning and decided that they wanted to move forward on the event center. So it went back to council. They decided to move forward. So here we are, really at the design phase right now, in moving forward with this amphitheater concept. So we brought DLR on board, which has a lot of expertise in building really renowned amphitheaters and event centers. And they're going to go through some stakeholder scoping this evening and show you some of the design concepts that they have come up with. So we're really excited, and we thank you for being here. This is just the very beginning. There's going to be additional workshops throughout this project in the summer months as this comes together. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to DLR to run through this stakeholder meeting this evening, and staff will be here as well to help with any clarifying questions as well. But again, thank you for being here. And with that, we'll turn it back over to DLR.
Thank you very much, Bruce and Alan. First, I want to share my screen. We're going to be using a presentation tool that we found very successful in these types of engagements with stakeholders and user groups. It's called, you might be familiar with it already, it's called Mural. It's a digital whiteboard platform, as you can see here. I'll just pan out a little bit, where we utilize the entire board for our all our information that we want to sort of disseminate to you. And we can actually also in real time take your notes and your comments and feedback, and we can put it in right here as we speak. And that's actually helps us to remember everything that's being said, and we can take it back in as we develop this design. The other first thing I'd like to just sort of let everybody know about is our agenda for this evening. We want to set some goals for ourselves, but I want to tell you a little bit about who DLR Group is. I want to sort of run through the project in a different light than the way Bruce has. I want to share with you the way the site is configured and sort of our initial concepts on how we approach the site and the site design. And I want to open it up to everybody here tonight to talk about sort of the planning of this. I want everybody to know that this is not just a listening session for you. This is your time. This is going to be your community amphitheater. We want to hear from you exactly what it is that you want to take place here, what the programmatic elements that we need here. The group that's here tonight, arts, education, and some business related individuals, you are sort of the stakeholders that are going to be putting on the shows. So we're going to be looking to you to help us decide, you know, how many dressing rooms we have, how large the stage wants to be, how big the concession area, the amount of seating. All these things are critical to how we actually going to use the space. When we get to that sort of feedback time, I'm going to utilize a feature on here that times us so that we can actually ask a variety in a series of questions and not fall too far behind or get stuck on one sort of aspect. As Bruce had noted, we actually will have multiple other additional workshops for the stakeholders. This is the early May one. We'll have one in late May. We'll have a public workshop. There'll be future stakeholders workshops back in later June and July, and also in August. So there's going to be plenty of opportunities for us to share how this is developed and to get your additional information. So again, I actually want to say that we want to make the most of the city's dollars. We know that it's, you know, $8 million can go very quickly. So it's important for us to understand that this is a destination that can grow over time, right? It was also noted that the future event center, which is under like a separate phase, is not part of this, but we'll start to think about the infrastructure and its potential location. And the idea of growing the actual amphitheater itself from what we're initially looking at from a 750 to 1,000 seat lawn seat style amphitheater that can grow over time. But we really need to sort of decide what is needed now and we want to hear that input from you. And I really must stress that when we show you some initial concepts of the way this is laying out, that no real decisions have been made yet. So we're looking to you to sort of provide that back to us. You might see things you like, you might see things you don't like. It's completely, think of it as an open slate for right now. But it is be very important for us to recognize that there is a budget for this project. Believe everybody is very familiar with the site. This is the location next to the historic Marsh House, just right along Vineyards Parkway at the intersection of Marsh Creek Road. It also abuts up a little bit of a residential area in the Trilogy residential area of Reserve Court. The site is very dynamic at the moment, which lends itself to a wonderful concept of the topography for an amphitheater style space. One of the goals that we're looking at with this particular space is not spending too much money on regrading the site. There will be some regrading required, but to utilize that natural topography and landscape and views to best sort of to our advantage. When we look at this site, we sort of have divided it into sort of 3 zones from Vineyards Parkway here. The first zone being sort of at a crest. We're actually looking at that. You'll see sort of a plan underneath this. We've divided this site into sort of 3 zones. The zone number 1 was sort of identified as potential parking, entry location. Zone 2 is more for business and arrival points. We saw that as a lawn type area with concessions, box office, sculpture garden. There's a piece of the program that suggests there could be a wedding pavilion here. I think this locates in this particular area. Then the site sort of descends down into kind of a bowl type shape where I've identified it as the location for the theater, the amphitheater, and the actual stage and back of house sort of areas that can be serviced and loaded from one of 2 sides. This just shows you how we're identifying the fact that a large group of, we have a landscape architect as well as civil engineers is associated as part of this project. They will help us sort of create a buffer between what is the live action sort of destination portion of the site and how we treat the adjacent areas for this picturesque landscaped area. I should also note that in addition to landscape and civil engineers, we also have part of our integrated design team at DLR Group, mechanical, electrical engineers, as well as structural. And then we have a theater component team for audiovisual, theatrical services and architectural lighting, as well as acoustic designers, acousticians.
If I could add just a moment, Dorn, I think that's an interesting aspect of how we're structured. I know a lot of the arts organizations there will start to think of, how we'll approach this building from technology, functionality. We actually think of that, first, up front and parallel with the kind of the aesthetic components of the architectural design. So it's got to function, first and foremost, and having those internal disciplines, theatrical designers, the lighting designers, the acousticians, it's really important to creating and shaping a facility that's really going to work well and respond to the needs and make it a facility that's going to be, addressing your arts institutions and needs. So,
thanks, Dan. When we start to think about the breakdown of the site, we visited the site a couple of times, and what's interesting about the site is it sort of breaks itself up into, like I had noted earlier, different plateaus. It sort of creates basically different zones, if you want to think of them as living room type spaces. There's different spaces on different tiers that can be developed. So we're looking at the sort of top tier again for parking, but as you sort of arrive at the site, there's an opportunity for food trucks and artisans and vendors in the big lawn area. There's the concept I had noted about a wedding pavilion that overlooks sort of the site, sculpture gardens that are integrated into all of the site in landscapes. Down lower, you would see that the event center would be located in this particular area, as well as the future event center that would also in the future help mitigate some of the sound and music that might be coming from the amphitheater itself.
And just a reminder, to anybody who may have just joined recently, or to what Jordan mentioned earlier, all of these kind of ideas are really preliminary and part of what was set up as an architectural design competition. So in that setting, it's really about kind of looking at the opportunities, what the site lends, and us starting to project some ideas. Now is our opportunity to really collect that feedback from you. So don't take any of the things that you're seeing here as kind of set or fixed. These are ideas to really generate conversation and dialogue with you.
I want to talk a little bit about the potential for landscaping in this area. We recognize that all the vines and vineyards that are growing in the area seem to lend itself to sort of a theme that we can take advantage of. So we were starting to in this competition that Dan had alluded to, the concept of using the vines as a kind of a quilt work pattern to sort of be not just a big sign, but an identifier of the space when you approach it, as well as providing those vines around the landscape behind. And the added feature to that is that by keeping that moist and wet, it actually creates a fire buffer as well for the site. One of the features that we worked with during this competition with our landscape architects was this concept of an arroyo that actually moves through the entire site. And so you experience this, you walk along it. This is also, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, a spot in your community where it actually links up with other trails and bike paths and walking paths and hiking trails that are cutting through the historic marsh area and up through this particular area as well. To share just a couple of more diagrams, this particular diagram discusses pedestrian and vehicular sort of arrival through the site. You can see down on the lower end, there's a loading path to service the actual back of house and amphitheater stage itself, as well as a service for the front to the upper area where the food trucks, concessions area, public restrooms might be located. There are two distinct curb cuts on site now that could be reutilized to service the entry into the parking lot area. When we look at the site, the views are spectacular, and we think that there's a variety of opportunities to be able to look at the mountains on all sides, 360 degrees, as well as the ability to actually be in the amphitheater and engage the historic marsh house as well. And I'll show you a little bit of that in a few minutes. And finally, I wanted to sort of present to you the concept that our acousticians have been concerned with, as well as ourselves, this of sound management for the space. The orientation of the project of the amphitheater itself will be critical to sort of mitigate the sound and music that might be coming from this for the local residents. We understand that being an outside amphitheater, this will have sort of reinforced sound, but there's also the potential of the infrastructure that will come into play later that will also help mitigate that.
And we'll share a project as well that we've completed here very recently that's also, in near proximity to residential community, has really been incredibly successful. City's thrilled. They haven't gotten a single call from any of the residents that there's been issues, and they've held over 50 events there now. So it's been very successful. This is that example. This is in Sedona, Arizona. So a little bit smaller scale. This seats just over 300 with the capacity to expand a little bit. Set on top of a mesa, really strong connection to the landscape. But it started with the kind of conversation like we mentioned earlier that's about the systems, the acoustics, integrating the audio systems so they're really controlling the sound and the music that's coming from the space and contain it. This used earth as one of those objects that kind of contains, and that's why when we look at the site, getting and positioning the pavilion so that it's responding and working with the earth is really a smart design decision. That's extending some of the thoughts that we had here. So no, that's something that we're gonna pay attention to throughout.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
So at this time, is am I correct that the back of the amphitheater is up against Trilogy? I mean, if I'm sending sound and an orchestra out to the seats, is Trilogy right behind those seats?
Yeah, why don't you, Jordan, if you go back to the overall plan, I think some of the views that are perspectives as well. So we've actually positioned it so it's really out to the preserve and parkland. So, and the kind of back of it is towards kind of that corner of the residential community. So, we've got the I'll annotate here. We've got this is potential future event center.
Oops, sorry, I think I just moved that. Sorry.
You're okay. You're okay. Potential future event center, and then the stage would be set here. So really, your sound is going this way with the part of the community over here and more community this way. So then you're really backing up the kind of rear of the pavilion is here at that stage. Any sounds going off this way.
So from what I'm seeing, it looks like what I call a cut pie wedge for seating, but that's not seating there? Where
This,
that is,
sorry, seating would be in this area.
okay. So we would be using a PA, putting sound in that direction. And I was just, oh, you can't see my cursor, but I was just concerned if overflow would disturb the people of Trilogy was all.
Yeah, no, it's really positioned so that's kind of in a bowl and containing that. So
Great.
And yeah.
we're going to be, again, I've spoken to our acousticians about this. We are going to do quite a bit of studying in terms of when we sort of finalize the program. And, it was interesting because I was just speaking with him yesterday about this, that he would look at rotating this several degrees depending on how it sort of works in terms of mitigating the sound. I have another example actually of what that sort of could look like. This is an example of another project that we've done for an arts pavilion. And this sort of just is literally studying where the sound goes as it's sort of based on the landscape, based on the location. And this is something that we'll do 3D digital computer mapping to make sure that we're making the best decisions for the space itself and based on the site and contours. Let me spend a little time before we jump off. I don't want to lose all the time to just this particular discussion, but I want to start to actually share with you the actual imagery of our competition design. So I will start with sort of this overview sort of look for the project. This is the sort of upper level that I had mentioned earlier that would contain sort of your arrival point, the potential of having market vendors, selling wares, a sculpture garden, the potential of having a wedding pavilion and associated wedding a room for changing, restroom facilities, concessions, box office, and it would be very open air, very with shade to allow the sun through, as well as spaces for picnicking and that sort of thing. As you sort of come through a control point on the near side, you would start to engage that arroyo that I was talking about, which would sort of take you down into the natural berming of this site and where the landscape and the lawn seating would be. You can kind of see the stage there with its back-of-house support. There's a cantilevered roof that would actually contain some of the technical features that a stage would be required to have to to house these types of productions. And then this is the future events center location up on the top of the hill. And this could obviously contain gallery type spaces, special VIP seating, if you will, as well as maybe an indoor black box.
I think what really, inspired our team from a design standpoint, again, this is part of a competition. We want your kind of feedback here. But what inspired us is the potential to really embed this in a unique, really picturesque landscape, and set this up as kind of that Instagrammable moment. So as you might get visitors from the Bay Area coming in over the weekends for festivals, for concerts, that it's really a unique opportunity, and this is that kind of Instagram moment that would define Brentwood in their experience here.
Another view that I want to share with you is while you're down actually inside the lawn seating, the cantilevered roof that houses this technical technical devices for the concerts and performances also helps sort of identify and focus, let's call it, sharing your, the history and culture of your community, of the historic Marsh House as well. And finally, I think this mural keeps jumping around a little bit. And finally, I'd like to share sort of that arrival point at the top where you would come to what we've been calling the barn, location where the vendors could actually set up shop. And those vendors could actually be there, not on and what was it called, farmers market style. These can happen on days when there's not necessarily a concert. So this is a place that could be utilized for a variety of different events, not just for performing arts. So while I had put together a variety of additional information, I think if it comes up, we'll go back and share some of these items. I wanted to get more into the sort of meat of what we were talking about before. This is just a bubble diagram that sort of shows those elements pieced together where there is a relationship between these programmatic elements, if you will. Now, none of this is actually defined at this time, so things can move, things can change. We can add additional programmatic elements if it needs be. I did want to talk a little bit about the feedback that I received from everybody, and I want to thank you very much. There was a lot more feedback that came in than I think is attending here tonight, but it's been actually very helpful to understand additional items that may have been missed. And I think that this has been really interesting to hear about the different groups, the Brentwood Choir, the Broadway Repertory Theater, Ghost Light Theater, these venues that are currently in rented spaces that may want to grow their community with additional people by celebrating and performing in this particular space. They have a specific number of events that would occur during that time. They identified the types of numbers of performers that they have. And this is all critical for us to understand what type of performing artists, the number for the size of the stage, what is the gender typically of all the different actors, how many dressing rooms will we be required to have, changing facilities, locations for lockers to secure your belongings while you're performing, and things of that nature. I also want to thank Greg. If Greg's still on the line, he provided a wealth of information for the business aspects, him and Joseph Karen from 925 Entertainment Group, in terms of sort of the technical aspects that might be needed for the theater itself, sound, reinforcing equipment, and theater lighting. So I want to get into a little bit of participant feedback. But before I do that, I want to ask Dan if there was anything else that he wanted to add at this time before we sort of get into a generalized discussion.
No, I think that's perfect lead in, and again, kind of an overview. Obviously, there's more detail we'd put into that, but we want to hear from you and hear your thoughts and build on the great feedback that we were able to get from the surveys. That's really what's going to direct our path going forward.
So I think it's going to be very important for you people to understand that no idea is too far-fetched or too crazy for us right now, right? Everything is on the table. We would love to hear how we can make this really the best facility in the entire region to draw people, not just from Brentwood, but from the surrounding cities themselves. So let's talk a little bit about project goals and expectations. I'd like to hear from some of the people here tonight. What opportunities does this bring Brentwood that currently doesn't exist? I mean, what would you like to see here? I'm looking to you, Steve. I know that you got here early.
Here I come. You got your pencil ready?
This is the
We're
type
ready.
of feedback. I'm going to set a timer.
Couple of hours. Yeah, I was gonna say.
This is Delia, Colorado. She's a board member for the adult regional company Broadway Repertory Theater.
Great.
The first thing that I'm seeing is that just concerned me is I don't see a technical booth at the top of the arena to lock up all the electronics and everything between shows, and also for the stage manager to be able to see what's going on to call cues that move the shows forward. Speaking of theatrical shows. So that's a little bit of a concern. The other thing is the arroyo, is that a running body of water that
No.
would make noise?
No, it's a dry body, but if it does in fact have if there is a rain, then what we're going to do is we're going to be able to direct the water where we want to, as opposed to flooding this whole place out.
Yeah.
It's sort of a living dry arroyo, if you will.
Okay. Sound was more my concern than fire, but of course that does enter into our minds where we live. Another thing that I was wondering about is, so do you have a centralized ticket area that would also be secure because a lot of money comes in there?
We could set something like that up. I mean, we had the idea that there would be a box office sort of at the front when you arrived. Whether certain events needed to be a ticketed event, or certain events are just free and open to the public, it would occur at the top.
I think that's part of the diagramming we were looking at as well, and the arroyo kind of contributes to that. So you've got part of it that's kind of a landscape buffer and kind of keeps people away without having to implement, fences necessarily. So you get a couple of controlled points of entry, and then you can have ticketed events. Then you can also have free community events. So it allows flexibility, is what we were thinking.
The other thing, and again, I realize I'm looking at rough sketches that are maybe not to scale, but it looked like to load in my sets, I would have to back a semi up to a dressing room and take everything through there. Am I missing, is that access road big enough for our trucks, or is it more like for people to walk? Let me say it maybe in another way so you can help me get the answer I need. I've been involved in about 9 theater builds and maybe another 7 remodels of indoor and outdoor theaters. And I appreciate and really thank you for including the users in it, because I'd get to places and we'd say, well, cancel everything. We can't do it at this facility. They want us to unload our trucks 3.5 blocks that way and then push carts down a cobblestone path. It just didn't work. Also, I think if you're designing theaters, you already know about all the underground lays to put.
Yeah.
But these days, you know, everybody's at digital snakes instead of the typical one that gets buried and runs up to the booth. As long as there's, you know, a straight trajectory to the receivers to the snake backstage, so that you know, we can get those sounds into the auditorium. And finally, as far as dressing rooms go, I think it'd be a neat thing if the dressing rooms could, if you would think about them as a major one, two major ones for men and women of ensemble casts. And then I know something that always we were thankful for at the Lesher Center in Walnut Creek was that there were other smaller dressing rooms that the principal shared. So if one guy got the flu, it didn't, you know, sweep the cast ideally.
Yep.
So those dressing rooms then, while they can be made just to fit the bodies, they could also be made where the central makeup unit, the mirror unit, is a rollaway that then turns that dressing room into a classroom or a smaller meeting room that might be desirable to every nonprofit in the East
I love it.
County.
I love the thinking there. We actually worked on a amphitheater it was in Indiana, or kind of rural site, Columbus, Indiana, and took a similar approach. So how could the dressing rooms serve when they need to, and how could they also even you know, looking at it from kind of a wedding staging venue or to kind of community meeting rooms like you've talked about. I think that flexibility is really good. Let me real quickly, seeing that you know, time is up, I'm going to quickly draw that access route. So you would pull in here. I don't know if this is showing up on your screen.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. So a little lag. So there's if you zoom in, Jordan, just a touch, we've got a turnaround area here. So, and you can see it's sized. I mean, we've got a semi in there.
Oh, good.
I imagine a lot of it would be kind of box truck size, maybe
Yeah.
for deliveries, but it is sized to be able to get a semi through here. So then, you know, from a stage access standpoint, you can park the semi there and then you're right on to stage. So
Great.
you're loading it from the rear, and we've kind of looked at this. This would be that dressing room portion here.
Mm-hmm.
So then that kind of screens that back of house space. We took a similar strategy at Sedona and works really well. So if you have, you know, a group that's there, you know, rather than having the truck be something that's obvious or any kind of backstage activity that might flow kind of the outside, you've got a real kind of built-in scrim that keeps that back of house.
I just one more question at this point.
Yep.
Thank you. That's great to know. I appreciate that information. The last thing is, a lot of the times, like we'll do a show and we may rent the El Campanile Theater, open it there for a weekend, close it, take it to the Harbor Arts Center Theater up in Sassoon, close it, take it the next week to the Lesher Center. Those kind of three moves are where we go to find our audiences right now, but they also just about kill me. So I'd be more interested in staying at one place. All of theater costs, as far as royalties go, depends on how big the arena is, not how many tickets are sold, but how many seats are capable there. And then they send us a bill and all that's got to be paid in advance. So on the number of seats, 750 to 1,000, under 750, and you guys probably are aware, the royalties are less. That's why the Lesher Center is 780 seats, not 810, because that's a whole nother thousands of dollars per show royalty. So I'm glad to see the load in. And the other thing I was going to ask, and this is my final question for tonight, is as far as lighting goes, it looks like you have lights over the stage, which would be great. And I do produce some rock concerts, but for theater, we'd also need lighting out in the arena someplace coming in from the side or whatever. Or does that shade structure jut out over the audience?
So it's both. Great observation. And we do have the side kind of masts that would light from the sides and further you know, downstage from that. So I think you can see those in the renderings. Jordan's pulling up here, so you can see, right there.
Oh, those are lighting in poles. Okay, good.
Yep.
That's great.
And
I
then
think
what we,
there's opportunities here to study, you know, sort of side boom, light boom positions,
Yeah.
if they were sort of required as well.
Great.
We
Great.
also
the other-
wanted to, go ahead, Dan.
I was just going to add the other thing that we've done. You asked about, you know, control positions. Typically, what we would have is some performances and events will need that, and others won't. So what we've done and has been successful is we'll run a kind of solid cable pass that will go to backstage. So we'll set that up then, and it could be at one of the cross aisles that's shown here, where we have. So that would be accessible, and it would also be a hard paved surface. So you could set somebody up, you know, kind of in that mid area that Jordan's pointing to with his cursor, and you would have that hard cable pass. So you could run everything, and then also pull everything down when it's not needed. So.
Yeah, I did want to say something earlier to Steve's comment about sort of the use of, let's say, a green room and a dressing room that can be converted. Yeah. We're going to be looking at spaces being able to do that sort of double duty and multiple function, and having that flexibility that you can use it in a variety of ways. So the concept of having a house mix position, but then it can go away because you don't want to leave all that fancy equipment out, you know, in the elements, or you have a particular show that's not necessarily required to have that, then it would go away. Or it's sort of the infrastructure underneath the roof in terms of lighting pipes. There might be extras there so that there is a flexibility of the way someone might want to light a show. Things like that.
Other quick thoughts. Looks like I see Greg's hand up.
My turn. Hi, and this picture is great if you can keep that right there. I just want to say that as we were talking earlier and what this envision was of 20 years ago, this is exactly what I was envisioning, is something like this. So great job to your crew that did this preliminary drawing. Also worked with Steve Kinsella many times, and we do a lot of projects together as well. So his questions were all perfect. So just to reiterate again, that whole controlled ticketing, we have to have a way where, you know, if it's a ticketed event and we're having a concert, people are paying $30 or $50 or $100 to come to this concert, that there's got to be that controlled area. So you guys got that. Also, I'm just making my notes about that sound booth or sound, you know, sound center stage, you know, halfway up, where you have a separate area that's its own little, you know, 10 by 15 area where you can have electricity and all your snakes and all your plugins, which I'm sure you guys are doing that. But the other two things were the walkways, right? Where you kind of have those sideway walkways. Since we're not necessarily setting this up at this first go round of having any actual seats, what I would like to see or highly recommend that you make those walkways like maybe 15 or 20 feet wide, where you could set up a 8-foot round table with chairs around it, and or even just put rows of chairs, because keep in mind, we've got older people that aren't going to be wanting to sit on the lawn. And if there's a pitch to the lawn, you can't, you know, put your chair there. So by having those walkways that are maybe 15 or 20 feet wide, you could set like 2 rows or 3 rows of chairs there. You could actually set some round tables and have chairs. So think about that as we're in this initial conception of that way we could actually have seating, but not have permanent seating. So that was my comment there. The other thing is, I don't know how many of you guys have been out here or been in Brentwood, but it gets really hot. And Bruce, you can contest to this, that whenever we have an event in Brentwood City Park, there is nobody anywhere near the front of the stage. They're all 100 feet away from the stage because they're sitting back in the trees under the shade. So we have to come up with some sort of a shade component. If it's some sort of a shade, the triangular shades where we can put in some big old steel things and have some sort of shade covering. Thank you very much. There you go. We've got to have some sort of shade component, or this place will be useless during the day between, you know, May, you know, like today, this week, it was 90 degrees here, right? And it's May. If Steve and I had an event planned for this afternoon and it was 90, we would have half the people show up because it was 90 degrees out, and it's May, and it goes all the way until, you know, September or even October. It's been 90 degrees here. So we have to have some sort of shade component even if not the whole thing, obviously, but certain areas, or at least the closest to the stage. And my last thing was, that was it. I love it, guys. You guys are doing a great job.
Greg, this particular shading concept is actually something that can be retracted.
Perfect.
So you can have sort of the both and situation where you can be open to the stars if it's an evening event, or if it's a really hot day like you're suggesting, these could be deployed in such some fashion.
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah. Of that 8 million, we definitely got to put a chunk of it to a cover.
All right, let's move on a little bit. I think, you know, it'll spark a further discussion. I sort of want to.
Or can I just jump in real quick, Jordan?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Before we move on to the next thing, I think Annette Beckstrand had to leave and she had some comments. So I don't know if she looks like she dropped off. I just wanted to give her an opportunity if she was still on. But it looks like she may have dropped off. So I'm sorry.
Did she leave?
Bring it back to you, Jordan.
Did she leave anything in the chat?
She did, and it looks like the it's agreement with comments that you've shared, Steve, and then also pointing towards the survey feedback from Helen Dixon and Nancy Torres Smith. So we'll be sure to take a look at that. And I was trying to catch Annette before she left in the chat and thank her for that as we were finishing the conversation. So we'll certainly take those into consideration. It's very helpful.
Sounds like some of the feedback that we've been getting is sort of programmatic specific, but I think we would also like some of that big picture for the entire community. What do you envision actually happening here? That's sort of a good question for Steve and Greg, as well as, how are we going to measure that success? What are those needs that those types of performances will need to have? I'll set the timer again, but we might extend it out a little bit.
I think that right now I have friends at Festival Opera that were interested in performing out here. Some of the needs might be wing space beyond like say a school band wants to play a concert there. They don't need those kinds of things, but theater and opera do. So that could be done with facade curtains left and right that maybe don't give us as many, typical 1, 2, 3 exits on each side of the stage, but something that covered up the backstage area to help tell the stories truthfully. Opera too. And anyway, if you look at those kinds of things and kind of be the audience out in the seats and what would you see? I think Greg made a great point that we might need some wagons to get senior citizens out to the seats from the parking lot area. I don't know if that's in your thinking at all. And then also, if there are, I would assume that you'd have some kind of concessions. Maybe that could be an individual contract the city awards to someone later. But people need water, I know. And depending on the event, liquor sales would be something that is a possibility as well. But even food, I don't know if there's any kind of a thing within the wedding idea, if there's an industrial kitchen that's going to be used there where that could be used as a staging point for food for people as they're taking their seats. Or I don't think we should put kids with trays on them walking up and down the steps or the trails necessarily, but some foods are good. You have to get just a county $75 license per event, and you can do that as well. And for a lot of the theater groups that I've consulted for, they make money off that food, and they like having the chance to do it, whether it's at tables with coolers wheeled in, or if there's something else that could go as a pre-performance place where they could reserve a table and come and sit with their party, kind of like at Woodminster, and then walk into the seats. I'm sure that those people would be happy to share with us some errors that they've made along the way too. But I think you've really got a lot of good stuff in here. I'm very excited by it. Looks like the front of the stages may have some sort of masking on the sides.
That's what Jordan was just pulling in is a couple of different scenarios of use. So how with, kind of the simple kind of elemental infrastructure, it can be adaptable. So with curtains, it could be dead hung from a grid above, and you could effectively create a type of stage where you could have an outdoor opera.
Yep. Yeah.
But again,
Mikado?
we'd have to be very strategic about the amount of infrastructure, and then what would have to be brought in by your event company, because the city won't be able to afford all of these items to be able to make every single condition that you might envision.
Typically, when I move into a theater, and gosh, years ago on a tour, we were in 85 theaters. Other than lights and sound, we brought everything in. If there is a chair, you've got to bring it in. We don't assume that the facility is going to be a resource for those kinds of things. And everybody's, it's a choreography of a different kind of number to organize how those things get moved, what time the first truck arrives, what time the second truck and such. But yeah, we're used to bringing in everything, costumes, props, and people. I wondered, is there in front of there are so many shows now that are on track and that have really good soundtracks. I've been using them with some success, but is there a musical pit in front of the edge of the stage, a place to put musicians?
There is not a spot directly in front for what you're thinking like as an orchestra pit.
Okay. And can you tell me the guesstimated perimeters of the stage, the size?
Well, the size hasn't actually been finalized. Part of it is based on what we hear from you in terms of the types of events that are going on here. But, we have the opportunity to make it as wide as, within reason, obviously, and within the scale of the event center itself. But I wouldn't, 30 feet by 50 feet.
I just think I used to kid a guy who's now designing sets on Broadway. And I said, hey, I really like what you made, but in this particular show, we have actors too. And when you roll those units into the wings, we can't kill any more actors. We need them for the show. So having some space to wheel sets off stage, especially if you're getting 2-story sets, a place for them to live and then safety zones for actors so they know where they can walk and where to never walk. But sets in a musical at Broadway Repertory, even at Brentwood Teen Theater, we like to measure scene changes in moments, not minutes. And so being able to have a place to have some wing space would be a great idea.
I don't know if you have, dimensions in mind, or if you have more, kind of cast size, then that we can start to roughly size a stage in the appropriate wing based on that.
Yeah, I'd like to get back to you. I don't want to shoot off too quick off the tongue, but 50 foot wide by 20 foot deep would give us a lot. So that everything that's on stage can also be off stage. But let me look at some old set drawings and look at what that would actually mean.
Great, that'd be helpful.
Hey, you say Greg?
Greg, I do see your hand. I said great, but then the next word I was going to say was Greg.
All right, thanks. All right, so Steve's a theater guy, and I'm more the concert guy, right? So again, leave that stage that picture you got up there big is great. So again, everything that Steve's saying, I can't agree with you more. My feedback on the size of the stage, you can never make it too big. So I know we can't make it, a huge stage, but whatever the biggest size it's going to fit in that area, take the maximum amount of space, because you can never have your stage area be too big. Like Steve says, if you want to roll sets off to the side, but also at some point where we might even make some enclosures on some of that, so you can leave some of that set material there. Like you said, if he's going to be out there for a week, to be able to enclose some of that backstage area to make, stuff secure from the weather. And then the only other thing that you guys were just talking about, like you say, so is the concerts and the music. And, you don't need as much as the stuff that Steve was saying, like you do for the theater, but you definitely need the green rooms, and you need those VIP rooms, and, and having, a couple of bigger rooms, and maybe even having in one of those rooms have one of those accordion walls, right? So you could make that room and make it smaller and have two separate dressing rooms, or have two separate classrooms. So, but having a couple of smaller rooms is important. And I also think that in that stage area, we haven't talked about bathroom facilities. Do we have, flush toilets and sinks somewhere on the back side of that stage?
We're coming up on the actual physical program of the back of house and front of house. So hold those thoughts. We're going to get to those.
But But I'd say the short answer is yes, and those will be associated with the dressing room. So we'll look at, what's appropriate, and we've looked at versions that, would allow access from within the dressing room in a couple scenarios, and also just from hallways or common corridors. So there's a lot of, it adds flexibility.
And the other thing too that's good to have is like that, what I call the slop sink, right? Where you got a spot that's just outside the bathroom area where you have your mop and you have your bucket, and if you're painting sets, where you can go and wash your paintbrushes, and it's an area that's like a janitorial area with a sink and a mop and that kind of stuff.
Great.
It seems to me that you guys are very honing in on a lot of the specific technical things. Why don't we jump over to the physical program right now? Does anyone have any other questions before we jump over there, or comments? Okay, let's go over there. So I'm going to pan back out of here. We can bring these pictures and these images over when we need them. Whoops.
I do have a quick question about how much longer is your presentation going to be? Half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour?
So we've got till 8 o'clock, I think.
Okay.
Booked.
All right, I'm going to probably have to bug out of here in about 15, 20 minutes then.
Okay. Jordan, why don't you spend maybe 5 minutes, go through the program, then we'll get your thoughts, Greg, before you have to head out. So we appreciate you. Thanks for letting us know.
So I just want to sort of identify what we sort of have currently in the drawing of the overall competition entry that you saw. So there's a 750 to 1,000 seat lawn seats. There's a stage, and it should have wing space. We identified performer support space, but we didn't get into the logistics and the actual content of that space. There's obviously loading, and we should talk about the type of loading, whether it's purely box trucks, or like Steve was saying, the 55-foot truck, and then does it need, a loading dock, which might be a little bit unaffordable. The public restrooms up top, as well as the restrooms that are associated with performer support, concessions, the wedding venue. We're calling it the promenade, but that's sort of where the farmer's market would reside up on top. Concept of the sculpture garden and parking. So from a lot of the feedback that I got from everybody, these were sort of the additional suggestions and clarifications. Green room with a kitchenette, dressing rooms with personal effects locker storage for the multiple genders. Offices, so I heard that there was sort of a city operations office as well as sort of a guest operation office. Obviously loading was a big deal. And then of course, the concept of storage and what type of storage spaces we would need. Would we need an acoustical shell? Would there be risers? Does a piano need to live on site? We talked a little bit about lockers. And as Greg was suggesting, tables and chairs. And then of course, most important, lighting and sound equipment. So what I'd like to do is sort of just pick your brain. I should have, again, this keeps jumping around a little bit. I had to unlock it to grab those photographs. I'd like to try to discuss what program items everybody sort of thinks they're missing, and then I'd like to sort of prioritize and figure out methodologies to maybe sort of combine them so that they're on a flexible, they'll do double duty if need be. Let me set the timer here. Maybe Greg, did you want to hit this first if you have to take off soon?
Sorry, no, I don't have any feedback in that. No, it sounds great. And like you say, I think part of what it is like Steve and I have been to places, and Bruce, you might know, like Oakley did a little thing like this in Oakley, right? And there's like nothing there, right? I mean, it's barely there's barely an outlet, you know. So that was why we were being more detailed on some of these things. But no, this is great. You guys are doing great. Keep rolling.
Well, then let me ask you, Greg, with a couple of your venues, I mean, how large are these dressing rooms that you can envision? And you know, are they 10-person dressing rooms? Are we thinking it's larger? Do they open up and you can have a conjoined one for, let's say you close it up and then one's for men, one's for women, and you open it up if you have an all girls' school ballet production? Is there a star dressing room?
I would think that's what I was saying too, having a big room where you could have the 25 dancing kids, you know, with their moms and their bags, and you can open up the accordion door and have this big, huge room, right? Or you could take that room, put the accordion door in half. But I'm also thinking about more like for the band. So their rooms don't have to be that big. That's more like a 15 by 15 or 20 by 15 or something like that, you know, that we would call the blue room, where we've got, a dozen chairs. We got a couple of 6-foot tables with their drinks and their appetizers and all the list of stuff that these performers give you, right? That they want all these things in their dressing room. So, but then sometimes you might, that performer might say, hey, well, we need the VIP dressing room for me and my 2 lead singers, and the other 2 people in the band and the roadies, they get to go in the other room. I mean, you get some of those prima donnas like that. So, but I don't really have a keen size to the physical size, and Steve would have a better input, I think, on physical size of the rooms, dressing rooms.
Thanks, Greg. You know, I can't wait to see this. The other thing that I was talking earlier about royalties and how the number of seats dictates the bill you have to pay in full before you ever get the rights to do a show. And there was an outdoor theater, and I'm trying to think of where along the line it was, maybe Springfield, Missouri, but it had, you could cut the audience size in half. So they had a chain you could use, and say you want to do a show like In the Heights, very big band. They could be on stage, but it could be worked out. But that royalty for under 300 seats is roughly $1,200 a night. Over 300, it jumps up to $2,900 a night per performance. Each performance, you have to pay that. Almost 3,000. I don't know if it's something to think about at this point or maybe later, but I remember seeing, I said, what's that white chain for? And they said, oh, we're not selling those seats up there for this show. We're making it more of an intimate show at $280. So that might just be something you might want to throw into the mix as a possibility. Then the other thing was on the rooms backstage. Having one big room that was divided in 2 would be one way to go, but we could also have 2 rooms divided in 2 that could take care of a lot more options during the day for everybody from FFA to city meetings, that if there's no space at the Civic Center, they can pop out there and have their meeting. As far as the people that are in them, in a real big show, you're maybe looking at around 45 to 60 people. So if you think of how much space you need for 30, or take your principals out of that and say for 20 persons in each room. I can't think, what is it, 2.5 feet per chair. They would need some sort of dressing rooms that would have illumination by mirrors, so they don't wind up looking like me when they get out on stage. And let me think. I think I'm kind of thought out. Would the back area be air conditioned where the actors are held?
Yeah, it could be, yeah.
I think that's all I got, unless you got a question for me.
Well, let me ask you, can you talk a little bit about loading? And would there be, you know, an offloading? I'd be interested in here, like the type of space you might need. Are you thinking that you would need to build sets here on site, or would they come sort of pre-assembled, or be easy to reassemble them? I don't think we're thinking
There-
that's going to be a
There might be
shop here.
some assembly that's done, but no building, just putting it together. A lot of the sets, if I'm dealing with a real high 20-foot proscenium, then yeah, there might be some assembly required. Some assembly required. Batteries are included though. So no building there, no painting there. That's, you know, that's the respectful place. That's just where the show happens. All that stuff happens someplace else. And then comes the need to truck it in. So box trucks, yeah. Semis, some shows, if we catch a deal on sets and costumes from a Broadway touring show, that'll be a semi. But I've seen some semis where there's like a little ramp below the edge. It's not like a big loading dock. There's just a little ramp, and as the truck backs up, it lifts it the back end up, and you're right at the level you need to be. It's like a short ramp. But as long as there's room to get the trucks down there, theater people are happy to pick stuff up and carry it if they have to.
Great. That's good feedback. Greg, before you...
So just to dovetail on Steve again, I would definitely say, I mean, there's right at the old post office downtown, definitely have a little loading dock so that when those box trucks do roll in, that even if it's just the width of one, you know, so you would have like your loading area where one side it's flush to the ground, but then you have enough room for just one truck that could back in there, and you just dig a little hole, like Steve was saying, and just the truck just backs down, and it's then even with the back of the thing. So, and that's the easiest way to do it. It's the cheapest way to do it. You just dig a little hole and you let that truck back in there and loads right up to the dock. Absolutely. Steve, question for you on the seating, and I forgot that your royalties, you know, you're paying on the number of people in the audience. Let's say we do agree to build this thing to say 1,500 seating capability, right? But if we say, but we have a couple of pillars that we rope it off, and we say, oh, when we're having this as a theater, it's only 372 seats or whatever what was that number you want to stay below? You're muted.
50.
Sorry.
What was the number you'd like to stay below?
Under 300, like 290 is one seat. The next, if you look at like the three theaters at the Leisure Center, you've got one that's 135 seats, but 35 can be unsold, so you have 100 seats. Then you've got the Margaret Leisure, that's 290, and then the Hoffman Theater is 790.
Okay, so my question is then, so let's say you have this venue that because you have all this lawn seating, could seat 1,000 people, but as far as where we could put chairs is only that, you know, 300 to rope it off. Does that allow you to then get your royalties and say, look, I'm only going to be selling 299 tickets to this event?
Yeah, I just have to send an affidavit, but yes, that would be that would make it doable for me.
Yeah, and then again, it could be even where we put some of those walkways, right? That we put that first walkway where everything below that walkway would be that 299 seats, right? Then the next walkway separates it and puts us to whatever that next number is, and the third walkway is. So it's like, hey, you just close off that walkway and there's your theater size, right? There, that's all you have.
You know, and one more thing toward that and toward a control booth, it doesn't have to be in the middle up high. It could be it can be over on the side, right at the back of that 350 space.
Sure, yeah. Ideally in the center, but right, no, you don't want it in the middle of the field. It's a third or whatever the whatever
Like at
the appropriate distance.
Pavilion.
Yeah.
At the pavilion, it's over on house left.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
I think
Great.
those numbers are going to be really important to us if we use that as a strategy to set up the different tiers of seating. So I'd like to hear a little more on that and get those specifics if you can pass them along.
You know what, Jordan, I tell you what I'd like to do is I'd like to talk to my rep at 2 or 3, because everybody's getting going, started now for the fall, hoping we'll be able to do shows again. Let me talk to Music Theater International, the Concord Group, and 3 or 4 reps from the different companies and say, hey, where's your magic numbers, so that I can be more accurate in what I deliver to you.
And that's true. See, like I said, with him and see with me, if we're going to do a concert or an event, we want to be able to sell, 1,000 or 1,500 tickets and let people just sit on the lawn and, and have that kind of a thing. So, and again, it's the price of the band, right? Where Steve's doing the theater stuff, and those people, not necessarily you got all the cost to put the theater on, but you're not really necessarily paying the actors. At least I'm not sure. Maybe you do, Steve. But when you're putting on some of these concerts, and that's my hope, Bruce, that we're going to be able to say rent this facility to put on a commercial concert, right? I mean, I think that we really have to look at this as a little mini Vineyard. I mean, if this is a city-owned property, it can be a revenue generating facility by having concerts out there, and having, we do look at Steve, Bruce, we do those concerts in the park. How many people do you think are sitting on that lawn? What is the guesstimation from the city?
We get 2,000 easily.
I was going to say, that's when I looked, and when it's full, that was my guesstimation was somewhere between 3,000 and 2,500 people.
Right.
So that's where I'm saying that, we have to look at building this event. And again, if you're going to do lawn, it's a lot different. But, my, again, encouragement is don't be capping this thing at like 1,200 or 1,500. You really need to think about, at least for lawn area or just overflow where people can stand in the back. Because, again, we have concerts in our park downtown and 2,000 people show up. Now, those are free, granted, where if we're going to do these other events, paying these bands, and people will pay $20 or $30 or $50, or I mean, we go to Winty, and we pay $125 to go see the Beach Boys, right? And that's only 700-800 people that are there. So that's also the potential and because this is such a beautiful area, that's the future. This is amazing. I love it.
If we've got another 2 minutes of your time, Greg, if we could real quickly do a prioritization exercise. So where does size sit compared to performer amenities, compared to having the vendor and concessions area?
I would say the seating, everything depends on the seating, right? I mean, if your seating capacity is smaller, you can make your stage smaller, except obviously when I got to remember my buddy Steve, because his stage he needs a lot more wing space that you don't need when you're putting on a concert, right? So, but I think seating is one of the top priorities, and then the stage itself and the components of that. I mean, it's really all important, but
Sure.
I'd have to think about that question.
It's not easy, and that's what we're trying to make sure we navigate as well.
Right. Well, I guess the thing too, if you were to go back to some of those initial slides where it shows the overall grass area, is there not a future area that we can, or that it's just the side of a hill that we can't just make it a sloped hill that has no other amenities except just a big old sloped hill? I'm saying, one of those first ones that we were doing.
Sure. I think there are certain things that are going to cost more than others. Do you mind if I could ask everybody to mute? I'm hearing myself in the 2-second delay. Thank you. That helps. So if we, everything has other pieces that come with it. So if we say, let's try to get up to 1,500 seats, and we have more restrooms, and there's more cost for more restrooms, then there's more cost for, what does it take to park it? That's additional cost. I mean, there's all these things that start to relate to it. So that's why I think just hearing your feedback in terms of priorities will help us as we start to develop this scheme further.
All right, so I'll chime in on that. So one of the things too is I know that again, if we look at this as some of this additional overflow is just overflow seating, it's not the actual seating. Hey, if we are going to do something like that, you know, maybe we have an area set up somewhere, we could bring in some extra porta potties, right? If the fire department or the health department came in and said, okay, you know, this venue is really set up for 900 people, but we got this lawn area that we could put another 500. And Bruce and I are going, okay, we're going to do this. We need more bathrooms. We could bring in some porta potties, right? So I don't know that we have to get hung up so much. We have to have enough bathroom space for the number of people that might show up to this.
Just use
right?
one example. You're right.
Yeah, exactly.
I hear you.
Yeah. And then the other thing is the same with parking, right? If we're going to do this and we're going to say, hey, look, there's limited parking out there, right? I don't know what's happening with Tri-Delta Transit, but there's a college right across the street. And I would imagine that, I don't know what our relationship is with LMC College, Bruce, but I don't know how many times at night they're having classes, but maybe they do. But I don't think they use it a lot, you know, but there's a huge parking lot that's literally walking distance across the street. Now, again, you know, Steve and my grandmother aren't going to be able to walk that far. But again, you could have some offsite parking. But again, there's supposed to eventually be a bus stop there. So I think that's also something, hey, limited parking, get there early, encourage people to carpool. And I think that's something that people would do as well. So I don't know that, again, tying that parking specifically to having that just open grass area that allows people to come.
You know, I'd like to, I know Greg's about to leave, and I do want to ask you one question. We've been focused down at the lower area where the actual stage and the amphitheater and back houses. I'd like to hear a little bit more about sort of any programmatic needs that relate to what you need to do, but that's sort of at your entry point. You know, I mean, we always think about, you know, box office, but like, you know, what do we envision for that? How do we do, you know, a control point for this? How do you envision a control point?
So again, then you can have the Royal and some of the bushes and stuff that people can't, you know, sneak and come around. I mean, again, let's just say we did have someone like, you know, again, if we did have somebody as big as like the Beach Boys, those aren't really bringing rowdy people that they're going to try to sneak in, right? So having the natural thing will be fine, but just in the front area, there has to be, you know, some sort of, you know, gated area, even if it's, you know, a wrought iron thing where you can have where you can open it up and make it double wide so that when we're having the free event that we open up these 2 10-foot open wide wrought iron railings that we open up and it's just a big walkthrough, right? But if we're having a ticketed event or an opera and you need to have everybody come in one way, we close these wrought iron gates and we put the little padlock on it, you know, and everybody comes through the one entrance. You know, you have to be able to make it so there's only one entrance. So if Steve's selling people tickets to the show and they got to check in, or we're checking people in for a concert, you gotta have at one point, some way, have one spot. And then again, doesn't have to be anything there necessarily except the concrete area that's flat. Like Steve said, we can bring our own 10 by 10 or 10 by 20 tents and set that up. I've done events where we've rented even ticket boxes, right? Where if we were selling tickets on site, you know, we could rent a ticket box and put it there. Or maybe that's something that we build as a portable ticket box that can be moved to the right side or the left side. So again, a lot of mini details that we're not solving tonight, but there's that feedback.
Thank you.
Rosalinda, wanted to thank you for your comment before you have to jump off. So are there any quick thoughts you have about the Artisan Garden? Did we just miss you? I think I was just a step slow.
Was that to me, the Artisan Garden, or to Steve?
No, Rosalinda posted a comment in the chat.
Oh, yeah. Hi, Rosie. Are you still there?
I think she bailed.
Yep, she said she had to leave. I was trying to catch her just as she was heading out. So,
You know, one last thing, and I don't know how this works for infrastructure, but I know we were doing a show at Liberty High School, and our ticket thing was all hooked through this Wi-Fi, and there was no Wi-Fi. So somebody figured out how to use their phone as a hotspot, put it into the laptop. They saved the day because there were like 300 people out in the sun melting.
Yeah, good point, Steve. Definitely need to have a little hotspot out there. I mean, we're gonna have phone, you know, you have technology. I don't think that's a big issue these days, but good point. And you need, and also like wherever that check-in area is going to be, we got to make sure that we have electrical that there are places off to the side in the bushes, electricity that we can plug in. At least 110 is fine, but it's got to be like a 20 amp circuit, right? Because maybe we need to bring some lights because we're doing this event at night and it's going to get dark. So we need to bring in a couple of light trees or little clamp-on lamps that we're going to put under our tent. We need to plug in our ATM machine and our phones to charge. So having that check-in area definitely needs to have electricity close by. And like I said, at least a flat area that we could put up. I think a 10 by 20 would be plenty big enough if that was a check-in area.
All right. We start thinking about closing this up a little bit. Another section that we had that we wanted to talk to you guys about was, and I think we've hit a lot of this, but what would make this memorable and iconic and unique from other venues that you've experienced? Something that would be able to bring that draw for the community that they can't get, I think, like you said, over in Concord, right? What would make this special? And then if we could talk about maybe some potential roadblocks that you want to, like the Wi-Fi, that was a really interesting one. What roadblocks might we run into that we need to prepare for now?
I'll go first this time, Steve. And what it is, guys, it's my birthday today, and I had reservations at 7, but I moved it to 7:30. So we're running out, but it's across the street. So other things too, water, having access to water is good. Water spigots that you can hook up hoses to. Again, if you're bringing in tents and you need to hook up water barrels, so having different places along the venue that we can hook up a hose spigot to. What was the other first question you asked? You said something.
It was what makes it iconic? What's
the iconic? Yes, I think the location of where that is and the view and the way that you guys have, because I drive my bike out there all the time, and I know Rob Nunn, and I've been up to his house, which looks, he's got a VIP house up there looking down on this venue. Yeah, I think just where it's located and the fact that it's, we're going to have the vineyards around there, and the Marsh House, and it's going to be adjacent to a state park, and there's a dam right behind us that if it ever rains again, there'll actually be water in it. I just think the location of Brentwood being iconic, and maybe Steve, what do you think? Maybe we should call it the Brentwood Corn Arena. I mean, Brentwood is known for corn all over Western, California, all over the Western United States. So yeah, I think just the area that we're in is going to make it iconic. And the way you guys, like I said, that when I saw that first arduous rendering, it was like, oh, that's beautiful.
Greg, you should go. I like the idea of the harvest arena, but not the corn. I grew up in cornfields in Illinois. I think that would be something good. And also, there's a lot of artists that live and reside in this area, and to have something where they could put, permanent statues. Also, if there were an area to show, like we have the Delta Arts Gallery right now, but if you get over there with 400 people, you got to fight an old lady to get to the hors d'oeuvre table. But something like that, if there was some area that could be just utilized for people who come early. And here's the last thing about people coming. With the Brentwood Teen Theater, we do maybe 175 to 200 seats per show. Then there's 5 shows in 2 weeks. But if this were going on and I had more venue, rather than just like 4 shows a year, I do 8 with the adult company if the stage were big enough and music, man, that Wells Fargo wagon have a couple of horses pulling it on stage, and then they'd go off and hide in the wings. But I think that's something. I remember the Leisure Center used their own photo on their arts magazine, which told about everything that was coming up there for the next week, which Greg would probably be great at putting a magazine together like that and printing it in-house. But that way we would be able, to really nail down the icon of what the theater is. It's, at this point, even the drawings are exciting to me, but I'm easily excited. So I think no corn theater, but I do like the Harvest Theater or Settlers Theater or Greg's Theater.
Plenty of time to think of a name.
Yeah, no,
Well,
you're right. Harvest is much better than corn.
Well, Greg,
all right, guys. Hey, listen, I got to run.
You gotta meet your reservation.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. You guys are doing a fantastic job. Keep me in the loop. Steve, it's good to see you, my friend. And thank you for the birthday wishes. Take care.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us tonight.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Well, I'm about talked out. Is there anything I said that was real confusing? Because I do that sometimes.
No, I think
No.
I think we understand exactly where you're coming from. You're speaking to the right people who know these kinds of event centers and performing spaces. So I can't tell you enough how much we appreciate your feedback. I think that if you provide additional information and you pass it along to the city, Alan is our liaison who's been forwarding all the information to Dan and myself. So if you want to sort of spearhead any of that additional information to Alan.
I'll look into that and I should have answers by the start of the week.
Thank you.
That's great.
All right, well, we're going to say goodbye. We're going to go surprise Greg for his birthday. No, we're not. Good meeting all of you and seeing how much you've done. So many people see something like this built and go, well, I'd have done this, but they don't know what it is to take a hillside and make it into a cultural hub for the greater East Bay. I'm seeing this as drawing people from Stockton, Tracy, all over the place. And to, 17 years ago when I moved Brentwood Teen Theater here, or began it, I remember them saying, you know what, we're going to find you a venue. And I said, I can't wait for that day. And so I'm a little more excited about that 17 years later, that to see these drawings and know that you're of a like mind in moving this project forward. So thank you so much for that. And
Wonderful.
It'll be great. All right.
I
So
think before you go, I really like when you were saying about iconic. I think this could be iconic, but what makes some place iconic is not necessarily the place, but who comes to it. So,
Yeah.
but for you to bring people, you need to have a great place. So if you build something that's quality, that takes into consideration everything that we've already spoken about and a little more,
Yeah.
And you can make it so that the big artists want to come, then that's iconic. Because if you say, that's where like Harry Connick Jr. came to play, or, the big guys, the guys from the 80s, anybody that you want to bring over here, that you want to make it a little bit like Wenty, you do have to have all those little things taken care of so people want to come. And of course, the money to pay them, but that's besides that. So,
Yeah.
but I think with a lot of what you've already discussed, I think you definitely have something great. So,
and there's a
good luck.
lot of
Thank
people
you.
who do not want to play the pavilion. They just say it's too big. We don't feel an intimate connection. But
Yeah.
a 1,500 seat venue, I'll open up my address book for you.
That's great.
Absolutely.
That's great. And the memories that are generated from those kind of performances. So they're things you don't forget, So
Yeah.
that's great.
All right. Well, good night, all. You don't have to end the
Steve,
meeting.
thank
just
you.
'cause we're
Thank you
leaving.
very much. Thank
All
you very
right.
Thank you
much.
so much for all the great information tonight. Appreciate it.
It's been wonderful.
So I think it's just the city left. Do we want to have any sort of closing, Alan, in terms of what we learned tonight?
Let's see, I know we didn't get to the last part with next steps and sharing that with the group, but of course, as far as the recording goes, next steps will be for us to take all the information we're gathering from these stakeholder meetings. We were meeting with the community next week on Wednesday. So after that's done, we'll circle the wagons and kind of put together what our findings and come back to the group of future stakeholder meetings as well. So with that, maybe Greg, we can close the recording.
Yes, so the video will be available pretty soon. We'll have it uploaded on our YouTube channel. And so people that have not had an opportunity to see it, they will have an opportunity to view that and future meetings as well. So with that, we'll go ahead and close out the meeting. Thank you to everyone that participated, and we hope we'll be able to do more in the future.
Wonderful. All right.